Hello everyone, let us learn thalamus. So the thalamus is a part of the diencephalon and is located between the cerebrum and the midbrain. The thalamus is an ovoid mass composed of various nuclei. A white matter fiber tract running between the thalamus divides into three major groups of nuclei. This tract is called the internal medullary lamina. And the three major nuclei are the anterior group, the medial group, and the lateral group. Now let us try to understand the various connections the thalamus makes with the various parts of CNS. Starting with the anterior nuclei. The anterior nuclei is a part of the Papez circuit. The hippocampus continues forward as the fornix and ends at the base of brain as the mammillary body. Now the anterior nucleus receives afferent fibers from the mammillary body and projects efferent fibers to the cingulate gyrus. From here, further projections are sent to the cortex. The cortex now sends projections back to the hippocampus and completing the Papez circuit. The anterior nucleus is hence involved in memory processing. Any lesion to the anterior nucleus leads to a condition called acute amnesia or memory loss. The next nuclei is the medial dorsal group. Medial dorsal group receives afferents mainly from amygdala and the various other thalamic nuclei. It's an association center where it integrates various sensory inputs like visual and olfactory and modulates a person's behavior by projecting efferent fibers to the prefrontal cortex. Hence, the medial dorsal nuclei is involved in mood and behavior. In chronic alcoholics, medial dorsal nuclei may get affected and the patient presents with Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. In this, the patient has aggressive behavior and loss of inhibition. The lateral group can again be divided into a ventral tier and a dorsal tier. The ventral tier is divided into a ventro-anterior, ventral-lateral and a ventro-posterior group. The ventro-posterior group can further be divided as ventro-postero-lateral group and ventro-postero-medial group. Now, just below the thalamus is the midbrain, the pons and the medulla, and behind we have the cerebellum. Now the ventro-anterior group receives afferent projections from the nearby globus pallidus, substantia nigra. The ventrolateral group also receives afferents from globus pallidus and the cerebellum. From here, efferent fibers are projected to the cortex. To be more specific, ventroanterior projects to the premotor cortex. The ventrolateral projects to the motor cortex. And hence, the ventroanterior and ventrolateral group influence motor activity. These are again a potential site or target for treating tremors. Going to the next group of nuclei, which is the ventroposterolateral VPL and the VPM nuclei. So the VPL receives input from spinal lemniscus and the medial lemniscus, which bring in sensations of the opposite half of the trunk and limbs. The VPM nucleus, on the other hand, receives afferents from the trigeminal lemniscus, which brings sensations from the opposite half of the face. Now, from here, efferents are projected to the sensory cortex. Thus, VPM and VPL are sensory relay stations. and are a target or potential site for treating severe pain. Now going to the dorsal tier. The dorsal tier is named as the lateral dorsal group, the lateral posterior group, and the pulvinar. These receive afferents from the superior colliculus and the pretectum, and they relate to various parts of the parietal and the occipital cortex as well as the parahippocampus. Their function is non-specific. Now behind the pulvinar, two nuclei can be seen. These are the medial and the lateral geniculate body. Now these are mainly involved in relaying visual and auditory input. So medial geniculate body is involved with auditory pathway. So from the inferior colliculus in the midbrain, it receives afferent fibers. And from here, efferent fibers are projected to the superior temporal gyrus, where the area 4142, that is the auditory cortex, is located. Now the lateral geniculate body is involved with visual relay. It receives input from the optic tract, and it sends efferents to the visual cortex in the occipital lobe. It also sends relay to the superior colliculus for relaying visual reflex. Hence, medial geniculate body is a part of the auditory pathway, and the lateral geniculate body is a part of visual pathway. Any defect in lateral geniculate body can present with ipsilateral homonymous hemianopia. The last nuclei which is of importance is the reticular nucleus of the thalamus. This is mainly involved in gating information that passes through the thalamus. So these are the important nuclei of thalamus. Most important one, the anterior nuclei involved in Papez circuit, and any lesion to it would present with amnesia. Any lesion of the dorsomedial nucleus, which is involved in mood and behavior, would present with severe personality changes like seen in Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Now, the lesion of VPL nuclei has also been known to present with a syndrome called the Dejerine-Roussy syndrome, associated with thalamic pain, where the patient complains of exaggerated pain and the threshold of pain is also reduced. So these are the main important nuclei and the pathways of thalamus. Thank you for bearing with me. Have a good day.